Okay, it works, Sorry. I don't know how to use this thing. I've been trying to figure it out the entire time. I'm Monica. I don't know if everybody here knows me. Can you guys all hear me? Okay, great. So my name is Monica. I know, I feel like 50% of you, but there's a lot of new faces, and I definitely want to get to know you guys after, because I recently moved out of the area, so I need to kind of recuperate and meet all of you guys. But my topic today, when they asked me to speak, was, first of all, I was surprised that they let me speak. If anybody knows me, I should not be publicly speaking, but but I'm surprised. And the second thing is, I was like, what am I going to talk about? That's another thing. They just let me. They gave me free reign here, which I was pretty grateful for, because I think the one thing that recently I've been struggling with the most is just chaos in my life. So the topic is be still and know that I am God, how to find peace in a chaotic world, right? So chaos is everywhere, especially in my life, and I'm sure in everybody else's here's life, right? 4 people already came up to me and were like, my life is chaotic. Thank you for talking about this, right? So who felt chaotic today, even coming into church, right? Like this whole week, and I feel like as I was preparing this talk, I felt like my life just escalating chaos. And I was really grateful that I actually was able to sit down and prepare this talk, because I think it was the only piece that I got. So forgive me if it's not the most amazing conversation, but bear with me. So does anybody know what lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good, any of these terms actually mean? And Queen is shaking her head, yes. Okay, do you know? Notice where my name is on this list. So I'm a chaotic neutral person, okay? Oh, my name is Monica. I'm Moni. I think there's also a Nick underneath, but it's not. So my co-residents, I'm an emergency room doctor, and my co-residents sent in a group chat. They listed us all as our personalities, right? And they put us each into a little box. And I was surprised to find that I was chaotic neutral, because I sometimes feel a little chaotic evil. And I think they were just being nice and bumped me up. But yeah, my life is very chaotic. So I'm just going to describe just a day in my life, and I'm sure it's very similar to all of yours. And for me, I think finding that peace is almost impossible. And you'll see exactly what I mean. All right, so I wake up at let's say 5 a.m., right? This is probably what happened today, right? Woke up at 5 a.m., drove to work, barely showered, sorry for, barely rinsed my body, jumped out of the shower, kind of got to work. There was soap involved. It was a quick rinse, just okay? There was a TikTok recently about the guy that created a shower, a car wash shower. That was me today. I created that, yeah. It was cool. I was like, this guy's smart and lazy at the same time, but that's me. So I showered, finally woke up, maybe, got a cup of coffee. I'm walking into work. I'm dreading it, obviously, right? I walk in, and there's 40 people in the waiting room, okay? And I have to see everybody, basically, right? Because in my head, if there's a large amount of people in the waiting room, somebody could die, right? I don't know what's out there, and it's so overwhelming, and it's so scary, right? And each patient is given a triage number. 1 is urgent, they're actively dying, and you need to be there at the bedside now. You can't, where are you, 2 is they're gonna die. They probably have maybe they may die, but they're not in the process of dying, so we have some time. So it's but you need to be there quickly. So they announce it overhead. So 2s are heart attacks, strokes, things that are like, you need an active intervention within like a certain amount of time, and you have to act quick and make a quick decision, right? So there's those people that are level 2s. Those people tend to get brought back really quickly into a bed, but there's a large boarding situation, meaning there's no beds in the ER. So they're like sitting in the waiting room, and you walk in, and there's like 10 people that are level 2s, meaning they're pretty sick and need a bed immediately, but there's like no beds back there. Then there's, sorry if I'm rambling, but there's 20 people that are like level 3, meaning they're stable, they should be in the ER, but they're like sick, but they're okay. Like they're not gonna, if they could wait 24 hours and still be okay. And then there's the like level 4 or 5s that I don't know why they're there, but like they don't have a primary care doctor, and eventually most of them leave because we don't have time to get to them, right? So if you're waiting for a very long time in the ER, most of the time, you probably shouldn't be there, right? But there's also the level 2s that lately have been waiting very long in the waiting room, and there's a lot of stress and pressure to get them back, right? So you have to filter through all the people and get people out of the actual emergency room to get them seen, to get those people seen. So there's a larger amount of pressure. So I sit down, I get my sign out, and I'm taking sign out on 30 people that are bedded, right? And then there's another 5 people that are newly bedded that no one has laid hands on, right? No other doctor has, maybe the nurse has triaged them. And so I'm waiting, we finish sign out, I try to go see these patients, right, because they're probably active and pretty sick. I'm trying to get to them, I'm like rushing to like put in orders, because I know at any moment something could come in, like a heart attack, a stroke, a cardiac arrest, somebody actively dying, right, or a trauma. So I'm running around, I'm seeing these patients, putting in orders, and then a trauma alert goes off, and I have to rush to that bedside, right? While I'm at that bedside, I'm getting handed 10 EKGs, all of which I have to sign, right? And I screen them to make sure they don't have any heart attacks. Most of them are like garbage. I'm like throwing them out. Then there's one that looks terrifying, and you're like, oh gosh, I need to get to this right now. So I call the cardiologist. I'm like, hey, this looks bad. What do you think? I'm getting to that patient's bedside, all while stabilizing this trauma patient, right? And then I finally have time to sit back down to my desk, and I take a sip of coffee that's now freezing cold, and I just chug it, okay? Because I know that if I don't drink it now, I'm never gonna drink it, and it's gonna go to waste, and my $7 is useless at this point. So finally, it's midway through my shift. I'm finding time to sit at my desk, and I just like take a breather. I really wanna go pee, but I can't. And I'm like, but if I go pee, that's my break, right? That's my quiet and my peace, literally the bathroom. And so finally, I take a break, I go to pee, I come back, and there's like 5 new patients that are in the bed. And again, it's a cycle of ongoing chaos and stress, right? And then I get home, and then there's like, Mama's calling me, and she's like, where have you been all day? Why didn't you answer my 4 calls? I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't have my phone near me. And then there's like your friends that are like, you didn't answer my text, where have you been all day? I'm like, I was working, I'm so sorry. And you have to be patient, right? Like, and now you know why I don't answer anybody's text. Anyway, so that's just the day in my chaos, right? But like all of us have the same day in one shape or form, right? There's work, we're pulled in a million directions, and we can't find time for ourselves or for God, right? And even when we try to, it's not intentional, but we fail at it. At least I fail at it miserably, okay? So again, I'm very grateful that this was given to me as like, I feel like homework, because I think this is exactly what I needed to learn from today. So I hope that you guys also feel the same. So yeah, so there's times where we feel like we want to pull out our hair, right? And just scream and be like, I'm done with it, I can't do it anymore. And then there's times where we're like on a beach and nothing is wrong and we're totally fine. We feel like we can live like that forever, right? But we can't, right? Because there's balance. If we were always living in a chaotic world, right, we're gonna explode from anxiety, stress, insecurities. But if we're always living in a peaceful world, then we're not going to have any like drive or motivation, right? And for me, at least, I felt like I wanted to like quit and be like, oh, if only I quit my job, I'd have a better life. I'd have a more peaceful life. But that's not the case, right? I say that all the time. But it's not the case, right? So if I quit my job, there's other chaoses that are going to come in the world, right? There's going to be conflict with friends. There's going to be people that, like, you know, there's going to be children down the line and, like, you know, other things that come in the picture that are going to create chaos. And so the balance is key. So I was reading this book called Changes That Heal. It was also a homework assignment that Paul gave me. And he said, in the book, it talks about grace and truth, right? Grace is like when somebody is raising a child and they're just like, no, Habibi, everything's okay. We're going to just like sit, just take your time. Tell me how everything is. Like, no, you don't do anything wrong. And then this kid goes off to be some like Magnoon, right? And then there's the parent that's like very strict. Why didn't you get a 90? Why'd you get a 97? You deserve the 100. Like, what the heck? You know, where's that disconnect? And if you're too strict as a parent, then that kid grows up to be very like rebellious. So there's balance. There's a perfect balance, and that's what God does for us, right? There's grace and truth, and that balance is perfect for us, and that's exactly what he provides for us. So there's the right amount of each. So I wanted to read Matthew 25, verse 14 to 29. Can anybody read that for me? Yes, we have to open up our Bibles. Anybody? I'm just going to keep staring until someone... Okay, fine.
I'll help you, Mom.
Thank you.
For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away.
So this is the key. This is like the purpose of why I wanted to read this chapter. But I want us to read the actual passage. It's the parable of the talents. I could read it if nobody else. Oh, okay. Sorry. Do you want my Bible?
Oh, I don't need a mic. Okay.
Up here?
Oh, sure.
Oh.
Okay.
Is there a Bible?
So, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. For the kingdom of heaven is like man traveling to a far country, who called his own servant and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, and to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received 5 talents went and traded with them, and made another 5 talents. And likewise, he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug it in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me my 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents beside them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things, and I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the world, of your Lord. Then he who received 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you would be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I would reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received it back with my own interest. Therefore, take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away.
Thank you. So, what do we see here? Can someone summarize it? I know it's a long passage, and I'm sorry I made you guys read the whole thing. I think I was reading it again today, and I was like, there's a lot of really good tidbits in it, so that's why I want to dissect it a little bit. But what's the general overview? Yeah.
Make something of what's given to you.
Yeah.
Of what you've
So
been
like,
blessed with.
exactly. Like, live out the purpose that God has given to you, right? What else? Specifically, like, one verse that stood out to me was his Lord said to him, "Well done," in verse 23. "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things," right? So he gave him a little, right? He tested him in a little, and he was able to prove that he was going to do well with a little, right? And then, look, so then he goes, "I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord," right? So peace and joy are kind of like synonymous to me, right? Enter into the joy of your Lord, right? So when we are living out our purpose in God, we find joy in it, okay? And God's going to test us, right? He's going to give you the 5 talents. He's not going to give you 10 talents all of a sudden, right? So I was listening to a podcast a couple days ago, and it was talking about how, we pray for, this huge prayer. Like, God, give me a huge business, right? Make me so successful that but then we are not prepared for it, right? We're not ready to accept that this is what we need, that purpose, right? Because there's steps to getting there. We have to try to, learn leadership. There's talents that I need to learn. I have to learn the business aspect. I have to learn how to be communicative and give good constructive criticism, right? As a team, as a leader of a team. So all of these things lead up to the final talent and the final purpose, right? So if you can't pass the small test, right, how can God give you the big one, right? Clearly, we're not prepared for it. We're going to fail, and then we're going to get discouraged. So he sometimes gives us a little to test and to challenge and to grow us so that eventually we then grow into the purpose that he has for us, right? So the reason I bring up this passage is because, again, there's balance. Too much chaos, we get overwhelmed, we freeze, right? We can't keep going. And then when we're too lazy, God's like, well, why didn't you deposit it? Why didn't you make anything of the 5? And you're asking for more, right? I gave you, and you didn't even do anything with it. So there's a balance always, right? And when we find that balance, we enter into the joy that God has for us. And we find that peace. My takeaway from this is balance is key, all right? Not too much chaos, not too much peace. All right. So I like to think of my life, or our lives, as a jar, okay? This is the jar. Okay? Every day is a jar, all right? Yeah. Every day we get a new jar, all right? And we choose what goes in the jar. We have work, right? We have friends. We have studying. We have families. We have relationships. We have conflict. And we have errands that we have to run, and so continue, so on and so forth, right? And what you fill in that jar is what you're going to overflow, right? Eventually you're going to overflow because you can't fit everything into the jar. And when you can't fit everything in, right, it causes anxiety, you get just inner turmoil, you're less patient, right? You overflow all of that to others around you. And so you can't take it anymore, and then that's what everyone sees around you. So choose what goes in the jar. And every day, we need to be refreshed, right? That jar needs to be cleansed and emptied out so that we can make room for the things that we want to overflow in our lives. So, can anybody read Proverbs 4:23 to 25?
Yeah, I'll go. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you.
So, what do we take away from this? What is the jar? Yeah, so the jar is the heart. And do we really guard it that much every single day?
Can you pass it
'Cause I know I don't. Right? And everything I do is flowing out, right? So I could see how, when I am not giving my fill and getting my fill, I'm literally I'm a monster, right? I feel like I'm just not nice. I, can't see my patients. I am angry at, my family. I become, closed off to people. I don't have empathy, right? All of that overflows. Because I'm not guarding my heart. And my heart is what everything outflows from, right? And then the second verse says, let your eyes look straight ahead, right? Fix your gaze directly before you. Am I just staring at Mark? Is that what it's telling me to do? Right ahead of me? Or what am I fixing my gaze on? Anybody? Yes. I'm fixing my gaze on him. And if I'm fixing my gaze on him and I'm guarding my heart and I'm filling it, right, that's where I'm going to gain the peace, where I'm going to be able to overflow to other people the peace that's inside of me. So guard your heart, keep your gaze on him, and remember that everything that you do flows from the heart. And remember the jar. Has anyone read the book Beginning to Pray? Okay. So I actually have not read the full book. This was a passage that someone sent to me a couple days ago when I was telling them that I was preparing the talk. And I actually think it's perfect. It says everything that I wanted to say, way better, more eloquently than I would have ever said it. Can somebody read it?
In the tense modern life which we live, the problem of managing time is an all-important one. I am not going to try to convince you that you have plenty of time and can pray if you want to. I want to speak of managing time within the tensions, the rush of life. I will spare you any description of the way in which one can make time. I will only say that if we try to waste a little less of it, there will be more of it. If we use crumbs of wasted time to try to build short moments for recollection and prayer, we may discover that there is quite a lot of it. If you think of the number of empty minutes in a day when we will be doing something because we are afraid of emptiness and of being alone with ourselves, you will realize that there are plenty of short periods which could belong both to us and to God at the same time. But what I want to speak about is something which I believe is more important. It is the way in which we can control and stop time. We can pray to God only if we are established in a state of stability and inner peace, face to face with God and these things. Release us from the sense of time, not objective time, the kind we watch, but the subjective sense that time is running fast and that we have no time left.
Okay. So I think, he's trying to say is he's not saying we're going to take away, like we're going to ignore the fact that like life is busy, right? Like pray. He's not saying, no, life's not busy. You are just like complaining. No, life is busy. Life is hard. Life is chaotic. But like maybe if we took a little bit of time, then we'll find that actually that small amount of time will have a large amount of benefit, right? And we'll find that that small amount of time actually grows and grows and grows because we find the benefit in it, right? Like how many times, I remember in medical school, there was like this roommate of mine who was so on top of it, right? Like she was just like, she would sit in her room, she would get everything done, and she'd be done by 5 p.m. I would get home, and I'm just like barely, by 8 p.m., like ready to eat dinner, okay? And then I'm staying up until 4 a.m., and like 90% of the time, I'm on my phone, like scrolling through Instagram, and I never got the work done, right? She was efficient, right? She used the time that she needed. She would go take a run, and then come back and do her work. And like I will never forget how efficient she was. And she had all the time left in the day to go hang out with her friends, see her family. And I was always just like, how does she do it, right? But now I know. She took time, right? She took time for herself. She took time in the quiet. She would run, right? Do something to empty her mind. And then she would refocus, recollect that. And ultimately, her time was granted back to her, right? Like she was able to actually multiply that time because she had the peace inside her. She was able to like continue. Meanwhile, I'm like anxiety like monster, like freaking out. I'm like, how am I going to do it all? And then I don't get any of it done, and I'm wasting the time on my phone, right? And I think a lot of us do the same thing, right? Throughout the day, if we maybe even started with just like, hey, let me not scroll for like 15 minutes on Instagram, and instead, I'm going to just use 15 minutes in the day to like sit in silence and do nothing but pray, right? Just 15 minutes. Like, I'm going to challenge you every day, 15 minutes, just 15 minutes. Everybody has 15 minutes. Because I guarantee you, if I look at your Instagram time on your phone, it's going to be like 3 hours plus, okay? 15 minutes of silence every day and see the changes that happen in your life. So he also says we can pray to God only if we are established in a state of stability and inner peace, face to face with God. And these things release us from the sense of time, not objective time, right, that we can watch, right, but the subjective sense that time is running fast and that we have no time left. What does that mean? Yeah. So our perception is like, what causes anxiety is like, I am running out of time. I have this and this and this and this to do, so I have no time, right? And so then I waste the time because I feel like I'm running out of the time and I'm focused so much on the time. But if I notice that every day, if I don't worry about the next day and I'm focusing on the jar, right? The jar is the every day, it's my heart, guarding it, focusing it on God, and living out just that day in God's purpose and living out what my God-given talents are in that day and only focusing on that, that frees us from the sense of like that expectation and the long-term like the objective time that's passing us, right? Because we're just focusing and living out God's purpose daily in that time. So it's a sense of release, and we get peace from that. So again, there's balance. We know that there's a purpose. We're going to live out our purpose, focusing and keeping our gaze onto God, and then we're freed from that subjective sense of time. The jar did not show up here. I don't know why, but that was supposed to be the new jar that we're filling and overflowing every day. When we fill it with the purpose of God, when we are living out the purpose and we're guarding our heart and we're keeping our eyes straight. Oh, it did show up. There we go. It was was translucent. All right. So this is one of my favorite verses as well. So Ephesians 3:17 to 19. Anybody want to read it? Since it's actually up there. Note to self, add the verse that you want up there.
That Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you being rooted and grounded in love may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the width and length and depth and height, to know the love of Christ, which passes knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God.
Right, so that jar, right? Like that jar is what we have it every day, and we only have one jar every day. Are we going to fill it with the fullness of God, or are we going to fill it with all the world, right? All of the like craziness of the world. And again, small amounts. I'm not saying ignore the world and all of the stress and the responsibilities, but overflow all of the fill of God into the rest of our lives, right? So overflow peace to my friends, overflow peace to my family, overflow peace to my work, overflow to everybody else around me. And I can only do that when I'm filled with the fullness of God. And only if I allow Christ to dwell in my heart through faith, right? So I have faith that God is going to take care of it, right? God is going to take care of the day today. And I'm going to live in the purpose of my day today because I'm going to allow God to dwell within me and fill me. So I'm saying choose your fill. This is like the theme. Choose your fill. Every day, choose your fill. You have a jar, guard it, and choose your fill. Because it really impacts you. 15 minutes every day, choose that fill. I'm going to say it again. Just kidding, sorry. All right, so in 2 Corinthians, verse 7, 5 to 7. Can someone read it?
For indeed, when we... No, I can't say.
Oh, okay. If you guys can't see, I can read it.
For indeed, when we came to Macedonia, our bodies had no rest, but we were troubled on every side. Outside were conflicts, inside were fears. Nevertheless, God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of Titus, and not only by his coming, but also by the consolation with which he was comforted in you, when he told us of your earnest desire, your mourning, your zeal for me, so that I rejoiced even more.
I feel like we all want to be Titus, right? Like, we're the person that, like, first of all, comforted Paul. Like, that's huge, right? So he's comforted by the coming of a friend. And who sent that friend? God, right? And not only that, but Paul is also rejoicing at his the desires of his purpose, right? Like his purpose was to take this group of people, right, and show them God, right? And that's what he did. Titus is telling him, hey, look at the people that you spoke to. They now know God, right? And they're zealous, right? And that helped rejoice and rejuvenate Paul. So living out your purpose, right? God gave you a talent. Living out that purpose will give you joy. But we all get troubled, right? We're all going to be troubled from the outside and the inside. Our inner anxieties and fears, our insecurities, and also the outside, our conflicts, right? People are going to try to tear us down, try to challenge us, try to like make us believe we're crazy, and from all senses of the word, like we're going to feel conflicted. But God comforts us. He doesn't leave us in that misery. He sends us reminders that we're living out our purpose. He sends us a friend with a message from him, right? So if we are filling ourselves And Titus must have been so full that he's like giving others joy, right? So like choose to be Titus, have your fill, right? And overflow to others. And also surround yourself with the people who are gonna give you that fill, right? Who have the zeal of God in them. All right, and then not so lastly, but we're almost there, I promise. Ezekiel 36:26, and I'll read it. It says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. But we have to be willing, right? Every day, again, we have to ask for that jar to be emptied from all of this, the chaos, and be filled with the things that we want, right? With the word of God and the peace of God. And if we don't ask for it, right, we're just going to be like running around. So it only takes 15 minutes to call up God and be like, hey, just fill me, right? It's a quick phone call. It's faster than I promise you your phone call to your friends or your text messages. And C.S. Lewis says, God gifts where he finds the vessel empty enough to receive them, right? So if your vessel's full, he's not going to like, he can only top it off, right? He's going to just put the cherry on top. But if the more you empty, the more he's going to give like the ice cream and the whipped cream and then put the cherry on top, right? So he's going to keep giving peace when it's allowed in. And then what happens when we overflow chaos without the peace, right? We allow the devil in, right? We are prone to more of like temptation, right? We're not able to like overcome the challenges. We're like just stuck. We're overflowing like anger and basically we become chaotic evil, right? Instead of good lawful, which was what we talked about earlier and my goal. So I think we should all try to be more like the stream, right? The stream is chaotic, right? Like there's chaos all around it. There's rocks, but it's flowing and it's peaceful. Anyone around it is like, wow, this is beautiful. I want to be near it. I want to jump in. Maybe not a good idea. But that's kind of what I like to think of. I want to be like Titus and I want to be like the stream. But I think the quiet is really intimidating. Like 15 minutes is almost impossible to do, I think. And I've tried it. Like I think even a minute of silence, I'm like ready to just run for my phone. Even here, right? Like quiet is intimidating. I'm like sitting up here and I'm like, oh man, it's too quiet. I'm hearing my thoughts out loud. It's really scary. But I think it's only in the quiet that we're going to hear God's voice. And this passage in 1 Kings chapter 19, it's when God reveals himself to Elijah. And I'm gonna read actually a little bit more than I put up here. I'll read it because it's a little bit, it's going to be a lot to read and it's going to be hard to put up here. But like but you should follow along with me. So I'm going to give a little bit. Does anybody know the context of this chapter? No.
This after the Mount Carmel victory, and he was like depressed.
Yeah.
Or is it? Oh, okay.
Can you describe more?
So if I got it right, question mark. I'm loud enough. It doesn't make a difference. So after the big victory where he had, yeah, this one's working. After like the big victory where he had, shown like Ahab and all the people like this is the true God of Israel after like the big miracle. Unfortunately, Jezebel was still after his life, right, and was still, as she had unfortunately massacred like so many like prophets and men of God prior. She was still like attempting at Elijah's life, given his ministry and who he was. So at this point, I think Monica's going to explain it. Like Elijah was literally depressed. Elijah had literally said something to the effect of, Lord, take my life. It would be easier, Lord, if you took my life. Because again, how difficult it was for Jezebel, this horrible, evil woman, to be coming after his life like that.
Exactly. So there's an external conflict. There's chaos in Elijah's life, right? He's like, I'm depressed. Sometimes that's what happens, right? We become depressed, and we get overwhelmed with it, and that jar becomes hard to hear God. But then, so it says and when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life and went to Beersheba, in verse 3, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die, and said, It is enough, now Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my father's. Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, Arise and eat. Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came back the second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights, as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. Is he eating the same food we're eating? That he's like totally fine after 40 days without any food and drink? Because that's not possible, right? Like, humanly possible, like the food that we're eating is not going to fill us for 40 days without any other food. So what was the angel feeding him? Anybody? It's the Sunday school answer. It was feeding him the word of God, right? Like, comfort. So, I mean, I've also seen this all over the internet. Like, they're like, oh, Elijah was also depressed. See how much food and a nap can do for you? I'm like, yeah, it's very true. Food and a nap is very important. But it's not the same food that, like, we're thinking of. And it's definitely not the same rest that we're getting, right? Because he's resting after he's eating it. And it sustains him for 40 days. So I thought that was really interesting, because it must have been some really, like, the food of the world is not going to sustain us, and the food of God is. And then he went into a cave and spent the night in the place, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, What are you doing here, Elijah? So he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord of God, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. Then he said, Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. So it was, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? So I think someone pointed out to me recently that, like, when something's repeated in the Bible, there's a reason, right? And he goes back and says, I have been very zealous for the Lord, God of Israel, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. And then the same thing happens, right? Like, he responds with the same response. But it's almost like God is whispering in his ear, right? Where does he hear it? Does he hear it in the rock? No, right? He doesn't hear it in the mountain. He doesn't hear it in the rock. He doesn't hear it in the wind. He doesn't hear it in the fire, or in the earthquake. He hears it in a small, still voice, right? So where are we going to hear God's voice, right? In the stillness, not in the fire, not in the earthquake, not in the chaos. So we have to feed the soul, guard the heart, keep our eyes straight, and recognize that we can only hear him when we're still. So that 15 minutes makes time, that subjective time, feel like a lot more. And it pays off in the end. So I was going to practice with some music, a song that's about quiet. I'll show it to you after we do the quiet time, because I think I was challenged that my Abuna that really I couldn't even take the quiet. And it's true. I think like even like the silence, the true silence is very daunting. But again, that's when we hear God's voice. So if you all do it with me, we're going to close our eyes. I know this feels like, but it could be really helpful for everybody, okay? We're going to close our eyes.
Monica, just for a second?
Yeah.
Before we do quiet, one of the most important things is when we enter into quiet, it's a very scary thing. And I think that's why people avoid quiet, is because you're by yourself in your thoughts. But I think the important thing to note is when you're taking silence, is to recognize that there is a presence that you are being silent before. And in doing so, there's going to be like literally an assault on your mind when you sit quietly. And the key thing is to say to yourself, in 5 minutes, I will get back to you. Like, whatever thought is entering, I will get back to you in 5 minutes. Like, there's nothing that I'm going to do in this minute that is going to change that thought. So, like, recognize that in the 5 minutes or few minutes that we're going to take, I don't know how long, Monica, we're going to do. 20? I'm actually going to tell you, like, the 5 minutes is going to feel like an eternity. And it's going to actually make you realize how difficult it is for us to sit in silence. So for 5 minutes, Monica is challenging all of us to just sit quietly.
Is it working? There we go. I would also say just to like, in that time, consistently ask God for your fill. Like, be like, God, I don't know how to do this. I'm sitting still before you. Just fill me. Help me overflow to others what you want me to be filled with today. So just like, try to pray during that time and like fill that void. And then can we actually close the lights? Is that weird?